get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We have
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes in importance of
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Administrator Office Hours live stream here on Red Hat Live Streaming. I am Andrew Sullivan, your host, and I am joined as always by Mr. Johnny Rickard. Hello, sir. Welcome
What's up,
back.
buddy? How you doing? How was PTO?
It was phenomenal. I told my team the other day that this is the first time in probably 15 years, like back, like way back,
Mm-hmm.
that I completely disconnected. Like I can't say that. I was 99% disconnected. I was because I kept Slack just in case any of the folks who report to me needed to reach out to me or anything like that. But I turned off email on my phone. I didn't have Google Chat. I didn't none of that. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, sometimes you need that, man. Like it's hard to completely disconnect, but yeah, it's sometimes you just need to be able to say, all right, you know what, I'm going to turn these notifications off, and I'm just going to sleep through the night for once.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I'm one of those people who I try and have not inbox zero, like zero emails in my inbox, but if I have unread emails in my inbox, to me that's I have action items.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm struggling, right? I'm paying the price now because I've got like 30 threads or something like that are unread, which is probably 100 plus emails.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Oh, Christian's here. Yeah. Hey, welcome back there, Mr. Dead to Me. No. I'm super happy. For anybody who doesn't know, Christian a week and a half ago left Red Hat. He joined CodeFresh as their lead developer evangelist. So happy to have him join us. Happy for him in his new position. I understand he will still be joining us occasionally. We've talked about him joining us here on the stream. I'm sure he'll be wanting to join the GitOps guide to the Galaxy. I hear you might be joining that stream occasionally as a guest, Johnny.
Yeah, I'll be on there tomorrow to I'll be Hillary's punching bag, for my SRE comment the last time she was on. So I'll be getting the payback.
It's no pressure when it's somebody else's stream, right?
Exactly.
You just show up and spout off at the mouth, and that's that.
I just do what I do, and there's nothing, no punishment at all. Yeah, I was looking at Christian's post on Twitter about it, like his CodeFresh care package is dope. He got all kinds of cool swag, so I was super jealous when I saw it. Like he's got all kinds of good stuff now.
Well, come on, we get fedoras, right? No, wait,
that's true. Yeah. That's true. We do get a fedora, but he got it was like a whole thing. Like he got socks. I mean, he was all dressed up. He could have gone out completely CodeFresh, and it would have been nice.
Hey, speaking of swag, I have a meeting this afternoon to review designs for streaming swag. So I think you have a conflict. I don't know if you'll be able to join, but yeah, for anybody in the audience, we're so close. We're so close to having swag for the live streams. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be talking about it. I'm sure it'll go up on the Cool Stuff store once it's available.
Yeah, for sure. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Do we have a Slack channel? No, not really. So there is technically a Discord associated with Red Hat live streaming, but if I'm being completely honest, it's really not used. Technically all of the chat from all of the live streams gets sent over there. So if you ever wanted to look back at any of the chat or anything like that, it's there. But really the best way to reach out to both Johnny and I is the Kubernetes Slack. If you just go to kubernetes.slack.com and if you don't have an account, create one and log in there. There's an OpenShift users channel. I'm always in there. I check it, multiple times throughout the day. You can always send me messages on there. So that's a good way to reach out to not just Johnny and I, but kind of the broader OpenShift community. And then the normal, social media, Twitter, Reddit, etc. All of my usernames are the same, which is the same as Twitch, which is Practical Andrew, all one word. And then of course email. you're more than welcome to reach out to me via email, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. I usually include Johnny on any responses, which is just jonny@redhat.com. You got a nice easy one.
I did. Got here at patient zero. Got in early.
Yeah. You've been here longer than me. You've been here, what, 7 years, I think? So.
Wow, next month it's gonna be 6 actually.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I celebrate 4 years in a month or two. So.
Nice. Yeah, man, it flies by. Like everybody says that. Everybody says it's just time flies, but it's like there's just so much going on and things change so much that like it's so hard to just
Yeah.
focus on things sometimes. But like it does fly by, and it's been a whirlwind.
Oh yeah, and COVID and everything has kind of made it worse because it's just like this is I won't. This is basically the highlight of my week. Like the stream is how I use to break up my week, and am I either preparing for or recovering from the stream? But all the days start to look the same. Let's see. Yeah, I'll put my email address into chat, Kamal. ICQ numbers, Christian. I haven't thought about ICQ in a solid 20 years.
Oh, I see my friend Kevin's on here. What's up, Kevin?
Yeah, and Christian did point out there that he's also on the Kubernetes Slack. That's now how he and I chat most of the time. Why am I not? I don't know why I cannot chat on Twitch. So I'll post this onto YouTube. So andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. So Kamal, I just posted that on there. Hopefully it'll get rebroadcast across because my Twitch is not, it's just not working right now. Oh, there we go. Let's see, andrew.sullivan. There we go. But posting links, anything that has a link onto YouTube doesn't get rebroadcast. So the redhat.com caused it to not get resent to all the other platforms. So posting it on Twitch is what does it for us. Dislike Walls Gardens. Yeah, I assume you're talking about ICQ there, rhope9. All right. Excuse me. All right. So I'll quit rambling. And we'll kind of move forward here. Excuse me while I cough. So this is one of the office hours series of live streams here on Red Hat TV, or excuse me, Red Hat live streaming, which means that we're here for you, for our audience. Any questions you have kind of about anything OpenShift related, whether or not it's something relevant to today's topic, which is going to be, we'll talk about that in just a second, External-DNS and Cert-Manager. You're welcome to ask that in chat. We'll do our best to answer those questions. We're here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern for anywhere from 60 to 90-ish minutes, depending on the topic and all that other stuff. So you can always ask questions. We'll do our best to answer them. If we don't know the answer, which, let's be honest, happens a fair amount of times, Johnny and I both have, we like to think we have all the right contacts, or at least we know where to go and ask. So we'll reach out to engineering, to product management, to whoever we need to, and do our best to get those answers. And if we can't get them while we're on the stream here, so that's why Johnny's really, really good at finding those answers while we're on the stream. So if we can't get it while we're on the stream, we'll follow up in a later stream.
And I cry really loud too, so people usually answer the emails.
Yeah, it's we've gotten really good at Slack, right? And unfortunately, our engineering teams are really good about in the Slack info bar, like, here's how to directly ping the team and get our attention type of stuff. So, Craig, what does the disk column represent when running a create control stats? Is that the local ephemeral storage for the running container? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I've ever looked at that. Have you, John?
Yeah, me either. Yeah.
I would. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speculate because it'll probably be wrong.
Yeah, let me see if I can get out there really quick.
Let's see. Officially use CSE. Yep. And Christian and I discovered, because we primarily communicate through GIFs and memes, that unfortunately Kubernetes Slack does not have Giphy integration. All right, top of mind topics. So for anybody who is new to the stream, or maybe it's just been a few weeks, because I feel like since May, it's like mid-June, and I think we've been off air 3 of the last 6 weeks due to conferences and PTO and all kinds of other stuff. So in case you've forgotten, top of mind topics are things that Johnny and I have identified over the last week or two, kind of since the last stream, that we think might be important to y'all, to our audience. So we try and bring it up. We try and make sure that you're aware of things that are going on. And please don't hesitate to ask questions. We'll do our best to answer about those as well. Do you have a vSphere hour planned? Wasn't there some CSI requirements? I will say yes. We are always talking with our vSphere peers. So both Robbie, Jerome, as well as Dean Lewis have been on the stream before. So we try and bring them back on periodically so that we can talk about various VMware related things. Although I will say that in this instance, the Red Hat VMware CSI driver is a downstream of the VMware CSI driver. So while the requirements are 99% the same, there will be some differences. But that's actually a good idea. Our Hope 9. We should probably bring the product management and the engineering folks for CSI in general onto the stream, because there's been a lot of changes that are happening there. But yeah, in general, just as an aside, so I think the versions might be changing a little bit, but the way that I understood it to be is that right now with OpenShift 4.10, the Red Hat vSphere CSI driver, so that's the one that's shipped by Red Hat, it's not mandatory. So if you upgraded your cluster from 4.8, 4.9 into 4.10, you can keep using the VMware CSI driver, the upstream one, but at some point that will become a mandatory. The Red Hat VMware CSI driver will become mandatory. It'll be a seamless transition once you get over there. We'll also do things like update or migrate any entry volumes into the Red Hat CSI driver. And the reason for that is quite simply because the entry driver is going away. So before that entry driver gets removed from Kubernetes, we'll have to make sure all of those things get migrated over. Can we have more than one service network per OpenShift cluster? I don't believe so. I don't remember. Let's try something here. Let me share my screen. Share screen. Let's go with this guy.
Yeah, I don't think so without something like a mesh or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's see. Hopefully this is big enough for folks to see.
If you could go a little bigger.
I don't know if I can because it's.
Oh yeah, you're in the browser.
Let's do this. I know I can make it bigger than this. So if we do an OC explain on OpenShift install explain install config dot networking and service cider, but we don't want service cider. We want service network. So currently only one entry is supported. So no, you can only have a single subnet defined as the for the service network there, or a single entry for the service network. So even though it's an array, there's only one entry allowed. So just for reference there. So what I did was go into, all of the OpenShift and kubectl commands have an explain subcommand or an explain option. And from there, we can kind of walk through the tree of things that exist in that object to get descriptions of them. So I just did for OpenShift install in the install config, the networking.service network to do that. But we could do the same thing with like an OC explain, service. And of course I'm not. OC explain service. I actually have to be connected to a cluster for that to work. And you see it spits back here all the fields that are a part of that particular object. So I can do service.spec. Oops, if I can type service.spec here. And then it'll tell me all of the fields that are available in here. So you can walk through, you can see all of the valid values, you can get a description. So this also works from within the console. So you can go down to administration and then custom resource definitions, and we'll search for service. Am I missing something? Why is there not just a service? Oh, because I'm looking at CRDs, that's why. And service is a core object. Anyways, we'll pick on one of these. And in here, if I do like, oh, I can't create a new one, of course. I had to pick one. Build here, instances, create build. So over here in the GUI, we have the same sort of thing, right? So kind metadata. So here's spec. So I can go through and select additional trusted CA. And I think that also works. I think there's a way up here. Yeah, API Explorer. So I go to service here, and then I can go do the same thing, create service. I was just looking in the wrong place. I had to go back to when Allie was on, and Allie was showing me how to do this. So yeah, so here's spec, and it'll walk through. I don't know why that's not working, but you can walk through and you can see all the information about the object, and it's just a helpful little thing to help you or to go through and see all the fields. All right. Fun fact: I ran free IPA on OpenShift. Christian, it's a well-known fact that like you are just a glutton for punishment, because you're also the one who spent, I think, 2 days figuring out how to deploy OLM onto Microshift, which, pro tip, technically possible, not at all friendly. So for anybody who thinks that you can use Microshift to get a super small, like full OpenShift deployment, that doesn't work. Remember, OpenShift is just there to provide the OpenShift API, but not necessarily all of the features of OpenShift. All right. Top of mind topics. Sorry, I got distracted by questions, which is a good thing. So a couple of things here. So first I want to talk about KCP. Oops, let's take this and go here. In this blog post, so we have an introduction to KCP. So this is something that we've started talking about in bits and pieces. If you have kept an eye on our What's Next presentations, What's Next has started to talk about this as well. And I think I briefly mentioned this back when 4.10 was first announced, or maybe when we did the What's Next presentation. But KCP is a way that we can provide so it's kind of two things is the way that I'll describe it. So one, we can abstract access to clusters for users. So effectively what it does is it gives a KCP user what looks like a cluster, right? A full Kubernetes API endpoint that they have full admin privileges to. And then on the back end, so what's backing that API endpoint is one or more clusters that are distributed across anywhere you need them to be. So it has a couple of really interesting ramifications. So one, for app teams, application admins, etc., who like, hey, I need to deploy my own CRDs or whatnot, they can do that. And two, it's not tied; it's decoupled from any one specific cluster. So their resource, and now I'm struggling to remember what they call the resources in here, workspace. So their workspace is theirs, and the workload doesn't know that it might be running across like 3 different clusters. And if one cluster fails, then it will, just like you have in a single cluster, then it will do its thing to reschedule workload across any surviving clusters. So it's a really interesting concept. It's still very much in development and all of that. So if that sounds interesting to you, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. It's something that I'm looking forward to testing out, someday when I have time, as a way for us to, again, abstract away a lot of the details of the underlying infrastructure. From an application perspective, they don't really care what infrastructure they're running on so long as they can access the resources. So this just takes that one step further so that as administrators, we can, not stop worrying about a specific cluster and instead worry about our empire of clusters.
Very nice.
Yeah, hopefully that made sense. You wanted to talk about Open Source Summit. Next week's going to be a little special for you, right?
Yeah, this is my first conference going. It'll be the first conference I go to as a Red Hatter. So Open Source Summit is in Austin next week, 21st through the 24th. So if you're in the Austin area and you're going to the summit, hopefully I'll catch you there. So stop by the Red Hat booth. I should be around, hopefully, lurking, making all kinds of. I'm loud, so you'll probably hear me like 50 feet away. So.
Did you say you're going to be streaming from there next week?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and stream from there. Yeah, so yeah, I'll go try and find a quiet place, bathroom stall, something like that, and stream.
Yeah, when I used to do a podcast, we used to do it from like we would wait until the expo floor would close, and then we would record a podcast. And usually in the background, you could hear all the beeping and all the noise
Oh
from
yeah,
the folks, all the behind the scenes folks doing their thing. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's still a thing. It used to be. Remember, like organizations, like companies would have these massive booths, and there was a trend where they would put a conference room like on the second story of their booth. And I never cared for that because it was still super loud. So you basically had to shout at the people that you were talking to. But
nice. Yeah,
yeah,
that's. I mean, I'm loud anyway, so like I actually try and like tone my volume way down because I naturally yell. I'm probably deaf.
oh, I know I am way too much time spent in data centers.
My God, or at sea on a ship, just I think it's finally taken its toll. So,
Or children,
yes,
not afraid to scream right in your ear. Yeah. Let's see. I'm just digging through chat here. Running database in OpenShift. So SJ Wang. So yes, you can run databases in OpenShift. Um, there's multiple schools of thought and opinion on that. So running a traditional database, so something like MySQL or MySQL, depending on, remember, I'm an equal opportunity offender with mispronouncing things. So I'll mispronounce it both ways. So that way everybody's unhappy with me. Anyways, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, all of those things. Absolutely, you can host them in there. Just be cognizant of it's a container platform and what that impact is to your database. So I'm most familiar with things like MySQL, and if you have sharding or log shipping or any of those types of things in place, you just want to again be cognizant that it's a container platform and containers aren't migrated; they're terminated and restarted. So how that might impact your application that's using that database, as well as any sort of data integrity things.
and there's some cloud native ones too, right? Like
Yeah.
Cockroach DB and Crunchy's got their stuff with
Yep.
Postgres.
Yep. And that's exactly what I was going to say. So yeah, you already knew what I was going to say, Johnny. You read my mind. Of be on
What
the lookout
happens?
for there's lots of cloud native databases that are now popping up. Cockroach is definitely a big name in that space. MongoDB is another big name in that
Yeah.
space. CrunchyDB, so on and so forth. So it really just depends on your application, what your needs are, and to be clear, those are not NoSQL databases, right? They are a traditional, or I can't say traditional. They are an RDBMS. They're just a cloud native RDBMS that takes all of the necessary actions, abstracts them away into the product so that it protects itself, it scales correctly, all of those things for the user. So yeah, the NoSQL databases, object databases, all that other stuff, they've existed for a long time, and they work great inside of containerized platforms too. So,
Mhm.
is the subnet of a route used when a route created same as the service subnet? So routes point at services. So you have to create a service first, and then that service will have an IP address on the service subnet. And then when you create a route, that internally points to the service in order to identify which pods it's going to direct traffic to. So the route itself doesn't have an IP. It's exposed through the ingress controller. And then the ingress controller will have a load balancer, and the load balancer is what has an IP associated with it. So ask an OpenShift Emperor. That sounds a little authoritarian for my taste. Need a live stream about Entria and Avi ingress controller integration with OCP. Yes, Gamal. So I think it was Dean.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Dean was on last time? We
Yep.
touched on that subject. So we'll see if we can dig up that link here while we're on the stream and post that. And yeah, Dean touched on that subject. We should definitely bring it up again and dig into some details. Is there any other way to manage DNS without operators? Yes, probably. It depends on how Kubernetes native you want to be, right? So if we're talking external DNS, and I'll touch more on this in a moment when we get to that section, but if we're talking external DNS, then you could do something as simple as, have a web service that pings, out to an external DNS, some sort of automation to do something. Operators, I think, are probably the easiest, though, because you can set up watches for when services happen or when actions happen. If you use the external DNS operator, it has a lot of different functionality inside of there. So it is possible, but it can be more or less difficult. Can you explain how storage works when a container is created from an image, assuming that no volumes are defined in the container file? Peter. So I think what you're saying is, if you are using a kind of vanilla pod definition, so one where there is not a specific volume, PVC associated with it. So I think there's two. I'm trying to think of how to start and how to phrase this. So there's three types of storage that we'll find associated with with any single pod definition or a pod instance. So one is going to be the container image itself. So when you start the container, the host that it's assigned to will pull down the container image and it will store it on that host. And of course, the container itself will have a copy on write layer on top of that. So any modifications that happen to that while that container is running will happen in that copy on write layer. And that is separate from the second type of storage, which I'm going to call ephemeral storage. So to me, when I talk about ephemeral storage associated with a container, I'm thinking of things like an empty dir or the other type of local storage that can be used by the application, but is not the copy on write layer associated with the container. That is also ephemeral, but Andrew, for whatever reason, differentiates those. And then the third one, as you alluded to, is like a PVC, right? I'm connecting an external piece of storage into my container image and mounting it wherever inside of there. So there is ways to control that ephemeral storage. So how much capacity is being used by the empty dirs and all that using quotas. So definitely a good one to look into. Hopefully that answered your question, Peter. If not, please feel free to keep chiming in on chat. Empty dir has to be defined in the container file, though, right? Yes, you would have a volume, right, a mount inside of there, and you would just define it as empty dir.
Empty dir, yeah.
So if none of that exists inside of there, then and even if it does, any writes that happen outside of one of those explicitly named points happens inside of that copy on write layer. So I usually bring this up with folks because, okay, I deploy a container, right? Doesn't matter what it is. I deploy a container and I haven't explicitly named like var log as a mount point. So any logging data that's happening in that container image or in that running container is happening to that copy on write layer. And that copy on write layer is going to be hosted or in on the host, the varlib container subdirectory. So this means that if you have, a single container that's generating like terabytes of log data, if it's being stored locally, which in that instance it would be, essentially you have the potential for not just filling up the capacity associated with that, with the local host disks, but also impacting any performance. So this is one of those reasons why, we generally discourage, workload from running on control plane nodes, because etcd uses the same disk by default, right? That one operating system disk. So if you have some random pod running on there that's writing a bunch of logs or churning through a bunch of temp space, doing whatever it's doing, that can impact the latency, the IOPS, the capacity that's available for etcd to do its thing. You can work around that, right? So do things like mount an explicit disk on varlib container, that type of stuff. So that way, and all of that's in the documentation on how to have a secondary disk for that.
So, hey, Andrew, do you want to finish the top of mind before we answer any more questions, just so we can kind of get through the step one?
Let's see. There was only two other things. So one, I will briefly mention for anybody who is using ACM that 2.5 was released. I think I'm like a week late on that, right? I think it actually released last week. We just weren't streaming, and I was on PTO. So, there is a blog post about that. I will ask Stephanie to please post a link for that. So there's a blog post that goes through some details. We also have Jimmy Alvarez joining us next week here on the Ask an OpenShift Admin. We'll be talking about ACM and ACM 2.5. Lots of cool stuff that happened inside of there. I'll also do a plug for the Cloud Multiplier live stream, which happens, I think, every other Monday. So that is hosted by, or that is done by, the ACM team. So they've done some really cool stuff in their 2 episodes, I think, that they've had so far. So please give them a watch. And last but not least, if you are a Helm user, Red Hat is performing a survey. So there's a link for that. Again, I'll ask Stephanie to please post that into the chat. So there is a Helm survey that just go respond. It'll help us identify roadmap, things that we can do in the future to help make Helm better and ultimately be able to do more for everybody. All right, that was the last 2 top of mind topics. So
Awesome. There's a lot of questions today. This is good.
Yeah. Please keep them coming. We love questions. This is why we're here.
And just so everybody can hear it, if there's just people listening, when we say container file, that is the same as Docker file. So like when like the big push to Podman, we've kind of gone to container file versus Docker file. So just so you know, it's there. It's the same thing.
Actually, that's a good point. I think I mixed up my definitions there because reading back, I see Peter is asking empty-dir has to be defined in the container file. Not necessarily. So the empty-dir would be defined in the pod definition. The container file, which builds the image, you can define a mount point in there. But the actual, like, where the storage space for that mount point comes from would be defined at the pod level. I'm pausing for confirmation or denial, Johnny.
No, yeah, I think you got it. And that Mozilla, just so you know, I read your statement literally, and so that's what I was responding to. So yeah, definitely what Andrew's saying is correct. It's in the pod spec for the empty-dir.
Yeah. Let's see. Was there any others? I see you're busy in chat.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Is one of the questions is OpenShift 4.10 fully supported on Hyper-V?
So yes, with a asterisk. So with OpenShift, we have kind of I'm gonna call it 2 layers or 2 levels here. So one, and if we can share my screen again. Let's see if I go to docs.openshift.com, and I just did a shortcut to the 4.10 docs as soon as it loads. Come on, internet. My kids are out of school. I would blame them for consuming all of the internet, but we have gigabit, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
I don't. Why is it unresponsive?
And just real quick, Polani had asked a question: how to fix issue of error from server, error dialing back in, X509 certificate signed by unknown authority. The first thing I would check is your certificate signing request. So just do a OC get CSR and then grep -I on pending. And if you have any pending CSRs, then just do OC ADM certificate approve and then the ID, and then you should be good to go. Yep. The other thing I would do is make sure that your kube config is in the right place, or that you have it exported correctly.
Yep. All right. So platform support for OpenShift. So if we go to the documentation here and we have this installing section, and you can look through, and there is somewhere down here, I thought, there's this list of like all of these different platforms, basically all of the things that are called out here: Alibaba, AWS, Azure Stack, GCP, IBM Cloud, etc. All of these are explicitly, fully, and wholly supported because they're documented. However, OpenShift is also supported on any platform that is certified for RHEL. So if I do, I'm just going to do a search here for RHEL certified hypervisor. And what should come up here is a KCS, right? What hypervisors are certified to run Red Hat Enterprise Linux? And we see here, so We have Red Hat virtualization, right? Hyper-V, ESX, ESXi, AHV. So even though Hyper-V and AHV are not explicitly documented over here, where'd my tab go? So even though they're not explicitly documented over here, because they're certified platforms for RHEL, they are still supported with a slight caveat. So they are considered non-tested infrastructures. And what that means, and I'll post this KCS link here in just a moment. What that means is that there's a KCS, and I am of course not logged in. There's a KCS that describes sort of what that means. So effectively, what it means is that we don't test it. So it is possible that you could encounter an issue that is a result of the underlying platform. So our support will do everything they can to help you, to support you with OpenShift. But if it's determined that, hey, this might be an issue that's happening because you're on a platform that we don't test, that we're unfamiliar with, we might need to recreate it on one of those platforms so that we can rule it out, type of thing. So it's still supported, fully supported. We just have to take, I won't say take extra measures, but we just have to be aware of that. So Hyper-V falls into that category. Ironically, OpenShift virtualization falls into that category, at least for now. And then there's a few others as well. AHV, I will say, I think I just said AHV is one of those, but AHV actually is a tested platform. It's unique because it's a tested platform, but for the moment, there is not a UPI IPI installation, so it just falls into the installing on any platform install method. But that'll be changing. I hope I answered that. Why is there no tool in Red Hat portal to generate certificates in a standard way? I'll let you tackle that one, Johnny, when we get to our topic.
All right, right on.
ODF is based on Rook-Ceph. Yes, it is. As well as Nuba.
Yep, I'll put that in there.
Yep. How to use Helm survey. I'm just catching up on chat here. You're usually ahead of me, so did I miss anything?
No, I think we've got everything for now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the last question was about the X509.
Okay. All right. So yeah, do you want to do Cert-Manager first? Or you want me to do External-DNS first?
It really doesn't matter. I can do either way. Do you want to take a breather, or do you want me to?
Sure.
Do you want to go?
I'll sit here and drink my water.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let me see. So Cert-Manager is an operator that is part of 4.10. It's tech preview. So that's one thing. You're having some issues, like just know that it's tech preview. It's actually pretty easy to install. I'm sorry, I'm trying to like share my screen and talk at the same time, which is obviously not going well.
I'm terrible at multitasking. You know this.
Funny.
I can't type and talk at the same time.
That was really funny. All right, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over like the two types of, well, there's a bunch of types of issuers and stuff like that you can use, but the main ones that we're going to go over today are the self-signed certificate. And so what that does is essentially it's self-explanatory, right? Where we're going to create a root certificate, and then we're going to use that same certificate to sign other certificates within the cluster. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use an Acme provider using the HTTP lookup. So I did kind of cheat, and I put a DNS entry out there first. So that way it can actually resolve the HTTP address and then create the certificate. There was a question earlier about the difference between an ingress and a route. And one of the things, like in OpenShift, I think since like 3.10, if you create an ingress object, it will also create a route object. It's just part of the API. So in Cert-Manager upstream, they don't, as far as I know, have any like full-on support for OpenShift routes. I was looking through their GitHub issues last night, and it looks like there was a lot of conversation around it, but they ended up moving away from it. But yeah, so I did mess around with it today. So using the Acme provider, I can create a route and then have the certificate get generated, and then get applied to the route. So we'll see all that though. So the first thing we're going to do is go over to operators, and I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. Is that good?
Yep.
All right. So Cert-Manager, and then just install. So standard stuff. It's going to create this namespace, OpenShift Cert-Manager. So there's two types of issuers with Cert-Manager, and it is there's the issuer, which is a namespace scoped issuer. So essentially what that does is that gives you as a user the ability to self-serve certificates for your applications. And then there's a cluster issuer. So you can do you can have like a self-signed cluster issuer certificate. So that way you can have your developers generate a CSR, submit that to you, and then you as the infrastructure admin can go in and approve that certificate, and then it gets distributed down to their namespace. So we're gonna do both. The self-sign is gonna be a cluster issuer, and then the HTTP lookup is gonna be the namespace issuer. So click on this guy, and then OpenShift Cert-Manager. All right. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create the first cluster issuer. I'm just gonna call it self-signed, and then spec. What's this? Big windows really quick before I start.
Dwayne, can you be more specific with your question? Is this like certified operators? So just while Johnny's typing, at a high level, there's three types of operators. There's from OpenShift's perspective, there's kind of core Red Hat shipped operators. So those are ones that if you go to operator catalog, if you check the Red Hat catalog, all of those. And then there is certified partner operators. And those are ones that us and partners have worked together to create, and they are jointly supported. And then there's community operators, which can come from anywhere, and they're not supported, but there is some basic validation to ensure that they work on OpenShift.
All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is, so now that we've got our cluster issuer, we're just going to generate a certificate. And so what happens when we generate the cert is it creates a secret in this namespace. And so we'll actually call back to that secret for our actual signing certificate, which we'll use to sign our downstream certs. So just click on create certificate. And then the form view on this is a little bit easier.
Are you using, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was reading chat when you first started. Are you using Acme here? Are you using?
So this is self-signed. So this is literally like
Okay.
I'm generating a key pair and everything.
Okay. All
right. So like I'm just going to call the actual certificate is just going to be the self-signed CA root. The issuer ref is going to be, I do this every single time. I cannot remember the name of the issuer that I said I created. All right, so the issuer, the cluster issuer is self-signed. Okay.
And to be clear, you could use this with your own like intermediate CA.
Exactly.
So if you have a corporate CA, you could get an intermediate and then use that to sign all of these OpenShift certificates.
Exactly. And if you've done like like with every other Kubernetes object, right? Like these kind of stack on top of each other. But like when I finish this, what I'll do is I'll show you all the different options that we have. Key pair. So this is the secret that's going to get created once the certs are generated. If we wanted to add email addresses and URLs and stuff like that, this is CA. This is one of those basic constraints. So if you ever look at a certificate and it says, under the constraints section, it says is CA, that's what this is actually setting. Let's see, subject. So if we wanted to put all the subject stuff like the location, country, anything, we could put that in there. If we wanted to update the usages, we could do that here. The default is 90 days. So I'm just going to leave that the same. And then common name, I'm just going to call this the self-sign. And then we're going to do ECDSA and then set it to 256. And then we should be good to go. All right, so I probably fat-fingered something, so we'll just give this a second. So we have our cluster issuer, right? It's ready to go. We have our certificate. I've obviously messed something up here, so let's take a look. Issuer certificate of secret does not exist. Self-signed issuer. Oh, I'm dumb.
Oh. Gave it the name of the certificate object instead
Yeah,
of
I was just
host name or the
kind of
DNS
run
name.
away. Yep, exactly. So that should be okay now. All right, bam. All right, I'm just going to blow this away and start over since I can't seem to. Every time. Issuer ref. And this is self-signed.
Ravi pointed out that you may have a space at the end of the secret name.
Ooh, good call. Cluster issuer.
Tell you what, while you're doing that, I'll tell you what. This audience has already helped me immensely because like when we had ROM on and we were going through assisted installer, you remember how we encountered that issue with multiple NICs that had IPs on the same subnet, and somebody pointed out, oh, it's that's come up like 4 times since then. And everybody's like, oh, that was exactly it. How did you know? I'm like, well, I didn't. Here's where in the live stream we figured that out. So thank you to our audience. You'll help us.
Exactly. I'm trying to fly here, so I'm not doing myself any favors. All right, let's see. And then private key, CDSA. There we go. Okay, it was most likely the space at the end of the secret if I did have it. So now if you think about this, right? So now we've got this issuer, right? We're telling the Cert-Manager that we want to use the self-signed issuer. We've generated this base certificate here, which is going to be our CA cert that we're going to use to sign all of our other certs from this point on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another cluster issuer, and I'm just going to call this one, cluster CA, and then. We were talking before about the different variances or the different types of CAs that we could use, right? So we could either use Acme, we could have our own external CA, self-signed, we could use HashiCorp Vault, and then there's this Vinafi. I've never actually heard of this until last night. So there's a lot of different CAs that we can use. And with Acme, it does both HTTP lookup and DNS lookup. So whichever one you've already got configured. But because I'm doing self-signed, I'm going to go back down to this. Oh, and this is actually
kind of a random question. Do you know if it'll work against like a like Red Hat IDM certificate management or Active Directory or anything like that?
I don't know. I was thinking about that. I wish I would have set up an IDM last night just to test it out. But yeah, I didn't even get that far.
How dare you?
I know.
You could sleep when you're dead. You'll be.
I know. I know. All right, so I've definitely, because I can't remember anything. So this was a cert. So this key pair, the secret name gets used quite a bit. So it'd be great if I could remember it, but I just, for some reason, cannot. But what we're doing is we're going to set this key pair here. And then we're going to allow, this is essentially saying, use that root CA that we created earlier to sign any subsequent, any certificate after this. So let me do, yeah, okay, cool. And then get rid of this space. All right. All right, so cool. So now we're ready to go. So now I'm just going to create another certificate really quick. And then this certificate is actually just going to get signed by the one that we had before. Demo. All right, so let me go back to this. We'll call this demo.
So you created the CA, you issued a certificate for the CA, and now you're issuing certificates for applications off
Exactly. Exactly. And so actually, if I wanted, the right way to do this would be, let me just go ahead and create a new project. We'll call it self-signed demo. And then I'll create a certificate. A certificate named demo. And then this issue reference, this is going back, or the issuer reference, this is going back up to that next level, right? Where we're going back to the cluster issuer. And we're going to, sorry, I will remember. We're going to use the, that CA that we just used, or that CA certificate that we just created.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name. It's just killing me that I should write this down. All right, and then, so this secret name, this is going to be the name of the secret that's in our namespace to look up. So demo, insert key pair. It's not a CA. If I wanted to do like a renew before, so I could say, hey, renew the certificate before the 15-day mark, right? Or at the 15-day mark. If I wanted the cert to last longer than 90 days, I could put that here. The common name, I'm just going to put, it doesn't matter. But for the DNS names, this is where your subject alt name field, this is where this would come in. So then I'm just going to call this app self-signed demo .ads. All right. So obviously you can have, other DNS names, or if you're going to use IPs, you could use the IP and stuff here. I need to set this to RSA, and then not this. Actually, I'll set this to PKSI, and then or PKCS1, and then 2048. All right, cool. So this is going to say issuing because I'm dumb and can't remember anything. So let me go back up here and get this name. And then cluster issuer is cluster C. Okay. There we go. Cluster CA. Did I do it? All right, cool.
Dwayne, yes, pretty much anything can be an Ansible playbook, right? I don't know. Johnny, maybe you know. Can you do this through GitOps as well?
There are some Helm things that you can do. There's a lot of things that you could do. I definitely think that you could do a majority of it through Helm. The self-signed stuff, the issue you'll have with self-signed is it's a untrusted certificate. So you'll have to pull down the cert and then put that in your local key store, right? And so that's either through Etsy PKI, CA Trust, and stuff like that, or if you do like the Acme Resolver or the external stuff with Vault, then yeah, almost all of that stuff can be done in either through Helm or definitely through Ansible. All right, so what happens when we create that certificate is it generates a certificate request, and then that certificate request gets approved, and then we end up getting this this certificate that ends up going into a secret in the same namespace, and it's in here, demo cert key pair. So if we look, now I've got this certificate. This is all base 64 encoded.
Yeah.
So it's all there. If I were to reveal the values, then I can take the certificate and I can actually extract these and put them in my local key store, and then be able to browse to the application using HTTPS. Yeah. So I'm not going to do that just so we can get over to the HTTP side. Or did you want to do the DNS one first? Like,
doesn't matter to me. And so you would mount that secret into your application pod, and then you would use that for its server.
So what you have to do, because the routes you can't mount a secret into a route. So then what you end up having to do, and let me stop sharing this. I'm going to share my terminal really quick.
Oh, right. So you're creating a certificate to use by the ingress controller.
Exactly.
As opposed to creating a certificate, but you could create a certificate and use it with like a load balancer service, right? An external load balancer,
yep.
Metal LB or something like that.
Yep, exactly. Not this. All right, can you see my terminal?
Yep.
Okay, so essentially what happens is if you look at what you'd have to do is you'd end up having to create an ingress control or an ingress, and then in the ingress you add these annotations. Like, so you're saying who my cluster issuer is. You can put duration and renew before if you wanted to, and then essentially create this ingress. And then what'll happen is the ingress will create the route, and then the route will pick up the certs off of the ingress. With the HTTP, it's a little bit cooler because if you look at the ingress now, and I just learned about this. I didn't realize that ingress or OpenShift had an ingress class name or like a default ingress class name. So I don't know why it just never occurred to me that it did have one. But if you put this ingress class name in there, what'll happen is when you create the certificate and you create this ingress, it'll go through, it'll send the request out to Acme or to Let's Encrypt. Mm-hmm. Let's Encrypt will, via a, it'll go through its challenge, it'll go through the order, and you can actually watch all of them go from like pending to issuing to approved. And then suddenly your route has it has a certificate on it that's valid. So what we're going to do real quick is I'm going to create a project, just so I'm making sure that I'm tracking the right one. I'm going to create a new project. All right, cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an issuer, right? So we were talking about cluster issuers, which we're using the self-signed certificate for. And then we're talking about issuers, which are namespace scoped. So I'm going to create a namespace scoped issuer that's going to use Let's Encrypt prod. All right. So then if you look, it's just, we're saying, hey, here's the Acme server. So this is just the prod URL, my email. This is the secret that it's going to create. So this will have all of the Acme certificate challenges and stuff like that kind of stored in it. And then we're going to use the OpenShift default ingress class. So then if I do HTTP 1, we can see I've got my issuer, it's ready to go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an app. And then I'm going to look at this ingress and make sure that I don't have any fat finger typos in here because I've only made about 15 of them since I've been online. So, but if we go through the ingress object here, we're just going to name this this ingress or this route rather www demo. We're telling that we're declaring an annotation to use the Let's Encrypt prod issuer that we just created.
Mhm.
We're going to use the OpenShift default. We're saying, hey, create a TLS for this hostname, and then put everything in this secret.
So effectively, what we're doing here is we're creating a certificate that is specific to this full domain name route instead of using a wildcard certificate.
Exactly.
For start.apps.
Exactly. And I was going to do wildcard, but the reason why I didn't is because generally, at least in my experience, in production, we don't use wildcard certificates, right? A lot of times we use actual name scoped certificates and DNS entries and stuff like that. So, like if you're a dev and staging and stuff like that, wildcard is fine. But like when you actually get to production, you want to know what's actually out there and using your CA.
Yeah.
It was bound to happen. Okay. So if we see we have an ingress, okay, and what that does is that's going to automatically create a route.
Yeah, I see the path there as the .well-known Acme challenge.
Yep. And so then what's going to happen is, what's going to happen is OT get certificate. Once this thing comes up and it gets approved, then there will be another route that comes up with that matches this that matches the ingress.
Mm-hmm.
But it does take a minute. So we can see the certificate request. So we can see that the certificate request has been approved. If we look at the challenges, we can see that the challenge is still pending. So this is and I know why this isn't going to work. The challenge is pending. So what's going on is Let's Encrypt is actually going out to DNS and it's trying to find that name so I can do like a curl on it. But because I was being clever, I changed the name in DNS. I did write this one down. So. All right, I think that's it. If I spelled it right. This is the only. So I will complain a little bit here. The only downside is if you delete things, it doesn't. Well, it didn't already build the secret. But if the secret was already existed and you deleted that ingress or the certificate, it doesn't create or doesn't delete the secret automatically. So that's kind of painful.
Yeah, I can see positives and negatives to that. Some folks may want to keep those for various reasons.
All right, so then we're going to do request and challenge. And this should actually take off here pretty soon. I'm just kidding. I'm dumb. So this is where I outsmarted myself here. So this is excellent that this is live.
See, this is why you got to test in production.
I know. So what's funny is I tested on my other cluster all night, and so like I was like, I should change all this right now, but I had faith in myself that I knew better. All right, and then OC get challenge. So this should actually be happening pretty soon. Okay, here we go. So get challenge. So we can see there's nothing in there. So if we do OC get certificate request, all right, we're good to go. OC get certs. Now if we do OC get secrets, we'll see our secret name, right? So we see now we have our secret. So if I were to do an OC get -o YAML secret, that dude, we can see now that I've got my key, I've got my and my cert, right? And then my CA for Let's Encrypt prod, that's all stored in the Let's Encrypt prod secret back in the
other namespace. Yep.
Well, so yeah, I was gonna say I forgot I did this one as an issuer. So because I did this one as a namespace scoped, that secret's stored here. But if I were to do this in a cluster namespace or a cluster issuer, it would be in the OpenShift Cert-Manager. So then that really just kind of, it does all the automation for you. This part was actually super easy. The DNS stuff, if you wanted to do DNS lookups or DNS challenges, you can configure roles in IAM policies and stuff like that within AWS, and it'll do a lot of that stuff for you. But it was a little bit more involved than I figured we had time for it. So if I do OT get route, now I can see. I'm sorry. If I do OT get ingress, that's there, and then curl, and the route will show up. What's happening? Oh. That one? No. Ingress.
Oh, there's no route there.
Yeah, I did create the object. But the certificate is there. Right, there's that. Oh my God. Mommy. This is me being dumb. I've literally outsmarted myself today. So let's see, delete ingress. All right, so now, what had happened, I don't know if you caught that, Andrew. I had the service name wrong. So I created the app as www demo, but my template had just demo. So and this should be it should be pretty quick. Yeah. Let's see. On hands. All right, so there's our route. Here's our ingress. Our certificate's approved. So now.
There you go.
Yep. Now we're good to go.
Curl did not complain, which is what we wanted.
Yep, exactly. So there you go.
Yeah. So let's see. Catching up on chat here, a couple of things. I'm gonna go slightly backwards. Zachary, no. So we're using OpenShift. So similar or same underlying technology, Creo, but OpenShift. And you can use Podman to create container images and all that other stuff for OpenShift. Palani, thank you for all the help. Yeah, glad to hear you got that sorted out. I'm wondering if maybe just it needed some time after the certificates are approved to refresh services and everything. Keep it. Modzilla, is there a good way to use self-signed search with containers without building a new image that has the root CA included? Is there an injector or something like that? So I guess it depends on what you would be using those for. So by default, right, when OpenShift creates a certificate using the internal CA for OpenShift, it will automatically add those the certificates for that and add them and all of that other stuff. So that internal CA should work, which is all self-signed stuff. If you have in your lab or your organization is quote unquote self-signed, right? I think you would want to do a cluster level certificate. So like in your install config.yaml, when you add additional CAs, when you do that automatically gets added to all of the pods. So there is an injector there. I don't know the magic behind the scenes, but that does work. So that would be an option to be able to do that. Like if you have a enterprise-wide corporate self-signed again. I don't know why I'm using air quotes. It is literally self-signed. It's just self-signed by your organization and therefore universally trusted, right?
Yeah. So Sammy, so basically the first thing I did is, other than all the screw ups, right? Like the first thing I did is I created a cluster issuer for a self-signed certificate, right? And then all that's doing is just telling OpenShift that I'm going to use this cluster issuer to sign certificates and not to worry about any external CA. Then I created a certificate that I actually identified as the CA, and that generated a secret. The next thing I did is I created another cluster issuer to use that certificate that was just generated, so that way I could sign all certificates after that. So that it's general, like if you're going to create a self-signed cert for your domain right now, you would generate the CSR, the key, and the cert all off that same thing, and then you would sign everything else after that with that certificate. That's exactly what we just did. And then the last thing I did is I just created a certificate for an app, and just showed that, hey, I can use this downstream CA to sign this certificate. The next thing I did is I used the Acme issuer, which is it can be cluster or namespace scoped, but in this case I did a namespace scope. And what that did is it just says, hey, I want to use Acme prod or Let's Encrypt prod to sign my certificates. Now, I'm using the HTTP lookup, so I went ahead and created the DNS entry for my route before I started all this, even though I forgot about it. And what Acme does is it does a challenge, and so as you generate your certificate request, it goes out and it looks for that HTTP server and makes sure that it's there. And then once it verifies that it's there, it approves the certificate. It creates a secret with all the TLS cert and the TLS key, and then it puts all of the Let's Encrypt goodness into another secret, so that way it can be referenced throughout the namespace. After that, I applied that to an ingress, and what that did is it allowed the ingress to go and get the certificate, associate the certificate to the route or to the ingress itself. And then once it all came up and it did the OpenShift fist bump, it created a route which made it available from outside the cluster. And I'll put all this in the blog, so that way it's a lot clearer than me mumbling and stumbling.
I don't know what you're talking about. I never do that.
This is good. This is good.
Yeah. So let's see. Any other chat here? Dwayne, learn ingress first. Trying to get a roadmap to study by. Dwayne, I think it depends on what specifically you're looking at. Most folks have probably heard me say before that OpenShift is like a fractal, right? Every time you find an answer to a question, it opens up a whole new set of questions that have answers that open up whole new sets of questions, and so on and so forth. So I think it would be helpful to understand what it is that you're trying to do. So Helm is useful for like deploying applications and all that other stuff. It's fully supported by OpenShift, and it is, I won't say an alternative to, but it is a method in addition to operators for deploying applications. Let's see. All right. So yeah, we can switch over. I can do the external DNS stuff. It should hopefully be quick.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This would have been, in hindsight, when I was we were talking before the show, should have built on like what you're doing with the external DNS stuff, like updating an entry. Like that would have been a cool demo, actually.
Yeah, they're separate but related, if that makes any sense. So, yeah. So external DNS is and where's my documentation here? So external DNS operator is used for creating entries in external DNS systems. So within OpenShift, it's only, and in OpenShift 4.10, it's only supported with the hyperscalers. So think AWS, Azure, and Google specifically. The upstream external DNS operator works with a bunch of other stuff. And I have tested it, and like I've deployed the upstream bits for external DNS, and I've been able to do in my lab using the RFC option. So there's a configuration here. So when we create the external DNS, so there's a source, or excuse me, not a source, a provider for the RFC spec. So I've been able to update like bind with my DNS entries and stuff like that. So I briefly considered using like MetalLB and the upstream external DNS operator to show how that works, but decided against it because this is what's officially supported. And it's I'll say it's also much easier with the hyperscaler because like everything just kind of works out of the box. So relatively simple, just like what Johnny did. We use Operator Hub. We can search for the, what is it, DNS? So external DNS operator. I will say that this is inaccurate. So you don't need to do that. It will actually create those for you. So we can ignore that. Once it's installed, we have the external DNS operator here. And while I tested this yesterday with a completely different cluster, I haven't tested it with this cluster aside from installing the operator here. So we'll see what happens. Could be fun. So you'll note that there's really only one CRD that's defined here. So we'll need a little bit of information before we get started. So one, my cluster is deployed into AWS. So you'll want to make sure that either the user that you deployed OpenShift with has enough permissions to create and update DNS entries, or you'll have to add credentials for that. So if we were to look over here in the external DNS, the configuration parameters, you'll see here there's like a credentials thing. So you can add your AWS credentials in there, and it's I don't even remember. Having a brain moment here. The AWS access key and secret access key. So you can add those into that secret and then add that into the definition for this, and that's how it would have specific, permissions. So if whatever your IAM role, etc., doesn't have those, you can add a separate account, or if you don't want to add them to that user. All right, so with my cluster here, I'm in AWS. I've basically done nothing in this cluster except add in the operator here. So with my operator deployed, I want to go to the external DNSs. Oh, and I need one other thing, and that is I want my zone ID. So let's pull back up a little bit. So on my my admin host here, I've got the AWS CLI configured. So I'm going to use this command AWS route 53 list hosted zones. And this is, I have a account that's linked into some of our engineering stuff. So it's super noisy. Like there's hundreds of entries in there. So I created this quick little grep command just to show the one that we want to use here. And what I'm looking for is this ID. So we have hosted zone, and then this specific identifier is what we're going to use. And I am using guacamole here, which means that it's a slight pain in order to copy and paste things out. So we'll do that real quick and save it off to the side. And with that out of the way, that's pretty much all we need to know. So I already know the domain name that I'm going to use. I just retrieved the zone ID. And from here, we can create our external DNS. So I'm going to use the YAML view. You can absolutely use the form view here. I just find it a little bit cumbersome to dig through all of these different options. So kind of what we were saying before, there is only a subset of these things here. It's like info blocks, blue cat, etc. There is a lot more in the external DNS. So just do a quick search here. We go to the somewhere around here. Yeah, we'll take the first hit. Yeah, so if we look in here, you can see that there's a huge number of providers in here. So the RFC 2136 is what I've used previously, locally with bind to do updates. Yeah, thanks for taking me to the RFC. I should have known better. I think it's down here is where the actual link is to show you how to do it. RFC 2136. Yeah, so this is how you would configure it. And it's just like if you've ever configured like ISC DHCP and bind to do dynamic DNS updates for DHCP clients, it's effectively the same thing, right? You create a zone that has a key associated with it. And then you're basically configuring OpenShift Kubernetes to use that same sort of mechanism to reach out and create those entries. Anyways, all right, so I'm going to use the YAML view, not just because I already have everything created and I can just copy and paste, but again, because it's easier for me to kind of see and explain. So let's walk through what I've done here. So one, I'm giving it and I don't want that one. I take that back. I want this one. So I'm giving it a name. So in this instance, I have my domain AOA for Ask an OpenShift admin. This one is going to key off of routes. We'll look at that in just a second. And then, of course, it's AWS. So the spec is where all the magic happens. Domains, we've got the domain name, and we are doing a filter here. So it is going to match specifically for aoa.devcluster.openshift.com inside of the AWS zone. So I shouldn't need to include this zone identifier because I have that identified there. But I'm going to do it anyways, just to be explicit and double sure, because I don't want to accidentally mess up anything that the engineering folks are doing, right? Andrew does not want to be responsible for CI failures and therefore delays to shipping product. That's just my preference. So a couple of other things that we've got set down here. So one, we've got a source. I'm going to set it so that it keys off of routes inside of the cluster. And because of that, I need to specify a default or a router name that we want it to use. So with a default OpenShift cluster, there's one, and its name is default. So if we come over here to the documentation, docs walk through all of this stuff. So you can see this down here. And you can also go in here to the options, and it walks through all of this stuff as well. So here's our filter. And here's our source. So this one is keying off of services. And I'll show that in just a moment as well. So here's the route one. And then the last thing, or the last two things that we've got in here, are the label filter. So essentially, I'm going to add a label to any routes that I want to create a DNS entry for that looks like this. Right. And then the FQDN template is what it uses in order to create that. So it'll use the name of the object and then append it into here. So I don't think that is required. No, that is required if you don't use the allow hosts. So there is an option, and I think I've got it in the other one, the second example that I'll show in a second, where you can specify the hostname entry that you want to create, the DNS entry that you want to create. If you have that turned on, then this FQDN template is optional. If it's not turned on and it's not by default, then this template is required so that it can generate the DNS entry. All right, so with that, I'll create my external DNS. If I want to, I can come in here and you can see it deployed the pod. And if we go to logs and switch over to the operator log, essentially we can watch what's going on here. So by default, this is not a super informative log, I'll say. Basically, it just tells you, hey, it's in sync with what's happening. It's in sync with the cluster. So you can increase verbosity, but and get more information about, hey, it's creating this specific DNS entry based off of this route, that type of information. I just haven't done it by default. All right. So I want to switch over to my project here. And inside of this project, you'll notice a couple of things. So one, I have deployed a couple of applications. So I've got this Hello Kubernetes as well as my simple deployment. And if we come down here to networking, I have services for each one of those. And I don't have any routes at this point. So if I just create a route, and we'll call this one hello without a W, and we'll point it at our Hello Kubernetes and specify the port and create that. So when I look at that, right, and I'll be able to access that application, everything is good, right? So here's my Route 53 zone. We can see aoa.devcluster. If I do a refresh here, you can see we still have our 5 records: star.apps, API ent, AOA. Sorry, that's the start of authority. So my typical 3 DNS entries for any OpenShift cluster that's inside of here. So this is working. Where'd it go? Oh, I closed it. This is working because of our wildcard. So very much to Johnny's point before of, hey, not everybody uses wildcard DNS certs, especially in production. Not everybody, or DNS certs, certificates. Not everybody uses wildcard DNS in production either. So what I want to do is I'm going to mimic, like, what would it be, or what would it look like if I didn't have that wildcard DNS? And in this instance, all I need to do is go in and add that label. So I'm going to add our label. I'm going to copy and paste it from over here. So this is the label that I specified inside of our external DNS object definition. And when I hit save, and then do a reload, and what we should see after a moment, it may take it a little, it usually takes it a little bit for some reason. But what we will effectively see is it is going to create a DNS entry for this host definition. Maybe.
Come on, little buddy.
This guy. Crash loop back off. Oh, but why? Containers with unready status. What's happening, friend? Failed to wait for external DNS controller. Timed out, waiting for cache to be synced. Well, that's not good. Of course, this would. I did this 24 times yesterday.
Yeah, I'm checking status.redhat.com.
No, you know what it is? So yesterday with my test cluster, I did, so what do I want? DNS. So I did both of these prerequisites, and it actually creates its own, as we just saw, its own namespace.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently it does need to have these additional resources applied. And of course not. Okay, so maybe it does need both of them.
What the?
So yeah, it's creating in the namespace. So there's an external DNS namespace now. So let's close out of you. So there's now an external DNS and an external DNS operator. So the external DNS is the one that I just created, and then we applied those permissions, right? So these here, role binding, cluster role binding. And now what I would expect is if we come over here to our pods, we'll help it along a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it, yeah, see. So it does actually need those instructions, even though it doesn't deploy to that namespace, which is interesting. So my bad. Please ignore my earlier statements where you don't need to follow the directions that are clearly there. I thought it was an artifact from pre-GA.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so now that that's in place, we can come back to our logs and look at our operator. Yep, reconciling external DNS. So now we should be able to go to Route 53. And now you see we have 7 records, including our hello and Sullivan. And if I copy this guy, go here, we end up exactly where we were before, just without the wildcard. So one thing you can do is if we go back to our, nope, I want my CRD. So one thing that is interesting, and I'll be honest, I haven't tested this before, so I don't know what's going to happen. I believe that what we can do here is remove this label filter. Right. So basically, without the label filter, it'll match all routes. And as a result of that, what it's going to do is, all right, thank you. What it's going to do is it is going to create DNS entries for all of our routes as soon as it goes through another reconciliation cycle. And the result of that is, and what I'm going to do is just to prove that it should work the way that we think it works, I'm going to delete our, yeah, there. Now we've got 23 records. So
that's awesome.
All of these, right? Here's all of our routes. And if I were to come here and do so you get route-A, here's all of our routes and stuff like that. So now what I'm going to do, and hopefully not break everything is I'm going to delete my default star.apps. Get out of here. Delete record. Yes. All right. So now star.apps is gone, but this guy should still work, and it does. Now it's possible that it's cached. So what we can do is create a new route. And I'm going to go back into my Sullivan namespace here. Go to routes, and I'm going to create a route. I'm going to name this simple because it's going to point at our simple service. We'll hit create here. So now we've got this simple-an Sullivan. We'll come here. And we'll have to wait for that to be updated. So we should see this jump to 23 again. Like I said, it does take it a second or two to update those for whatever reason. It's like it does the resynchronization on a timer.
Oh, yeah.
But until it's done with that, what we should expect to see here is this. Oh, there, it did work. So yeah, it does exactly what you would expect.
That is awesome.
So we can do the same thing with services. So I will copy out this one. We'll do this here. So I can do the same thing with a service. So you can see I just named this one for services. So same deal. Get out of here, help. Domains, I just want to do a domain filter specifically for that. I'll add in our zone identifier here. This time I'm going to do it for services of type load balancer. Again, with that label for, so that way it's only specific services. Although I think there's only a couple of, where'd this guy go? Let's see, get service. -a grep-i load balancer. So yes, so there's only 3 load balance services. But rather than creating a bunch of extra stuff, actually, yeah, we'll let it create it. I don't care. It doesn't hurt me.
YOLO.
You know. And then we have this hostname annotation. So the hostname annotation allows us, or is what enables us to customize or specify the exact hostname that we want. So in the docs, and I don't remember if it's in our docs or in the upstream docs, it does call out that this can be slightly risky because it does exactly what it says, right? It's going to allow the user to customize a domain name that may not be valid, that may redirect to something else, that can do a lot of other things. So, as with everything, grain of salt, moment of caution. But so we'll hit create there, and when we come down to, I went route 53. So now we've got 30 records inside of here, and some of these are going to look interesting because they should be our services. So there's our services that just got created inside of here. So what I haven't quite figured out, and when I was testing this today, I think this is a result of how my cluster is deployed. It's just a default IPI deployment. So I believe it creates internal load balancers for those load balance service types inside of OpenShift. So it's an AWS cluster. When I create a service type load balancer, it creates a internal only load balancer. So when I browse to this from my desktop here, this doesn't actually work.
Mm-hmm.
But what I strongly suspect is that if I were to be inside of AWS, this would work as expected. But anyways, the goal here is that it does exactly what it says it does, right? It creates that load balance service or that DNS entry based off of that service. And again, on-prem with something like Metal LB. So remember a few weeks ago when we showed Metal LB, the two of those in combination means that it's now super easy for me to do things like expose, again, a MySQL on port 3306 or all of those types of things So that way I'm not limited to just HTTP, HTTPS through the routes and the ingress controllers.
That is awesome. That's super slick. I like that.
So yeah, pretty straightforward. And the good news is when you delete these, it does clean up. So if I'm here to my service and I delete the external DNS, what we should see here is
I got you, Dwayne.
After a second, after it goes through and does its remediation, everything should just pop right back in. But yeah, I thought it was really cool. And you can see the cluster is working just fine now that I deleted that star.apps, wildcard DNS entry, because it created DNS entries for every one of my routes. So that way it just works. Yeah, I don't know why it takes so long to rectify or to remediate, but that's all I got.
That's awesome. So we had a question from Daniel Norris about he was asking, is there a way to tie all the routes automatically to use Cert-Manager? So I think if you have automation that can do that, like if you're creating, if you're using like Helm to create your route, or if you're using a template to create your route, then you can add the annotation within that, or any type of whatever automation you're using, Ansible, Helm, etc. But right now, I don't know if there's an actual, I don't know if there's something that you can actually put in the route itself, or even on the router itself to actually generate the certs automatically. I think you'd have to either modify your ingress and then build off of that template, or you put the stuff in a route. So I'm going to actually go back out to engineering and see if there's a plan for or roadmap for route support. It didn't look like it on the upstream, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't put anything in to support our use case. The other thing is there is a operator called Cert-Util. Thank you, Stephanie. You're awesome. There's an operator called Cert-Utils that was written by Red Hat Community Practice, and essentially it does exactly that. So what it'll go and it'll search for the secrets inside that namespace, and then if the secret is I can't remember if it's I can't remember the name of the cert type, but anyways, or the secret type. I think it's opaque. Anyways, it looks for a certain secret type, and if it finds it, then what it'll do is it'll strip out the certificates and it'll apply it to the route. So it's just another operator. It's just layers and layers and layers of operators, but that's exactly what it's designed to do. And I know that was some of the functionality that they were trying to get put in a Cert-Manager, but it didn't land. So hopefully that answered your question. I know that was kind of a lot there. So.
Right, I'm on mute as I'm typing away, responding to Dwayne here in chat. So I did post for anybody who's interested. So we do have a short link, a short URL for all of the live streams. So we have a YouTube playlist on the Red Hat YouTube channel. It's on the OpenShift channel as well. But if you go to red.ht/AOA, ask an OpenShift admin, it'll take you right to that playlist, and you can see all 70 something. What are we, 71 today?
Yeah, 71.
Yeah, so you can see all of those episodes on there. All right, so I think I don't have anything else to show. If there's any questions, feel free to ask questions. We'll do our best to address those here before we stop the stream. Anything we can't answer, or if anything comes to mind, right? If you're not watching us live, if you think of something afterwards, feel free to send us a message. So you can reach me at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, or on social media, Practical Andrew, just like you've seen me here in chat. You can reach Johnny at redhat.com, or jrocktx1 on Twitter, on Reddit, on all of the places. So
yep.
Yeah, we love to hear from you. So don't hesitate to reach out. I can't promise that I'm always timely in my responses. My inbox is, I need to figure out how to I wonder if I can in Gmail, because we use Google services, can I create a filter that will add a star or a label or something if it comes from external?
Sure.
Because 98% of the email we get is from internal folks. So that way it'd be easy to identify.
Bubble it up.
Yeah, bubble it up. Anyways, maybe I'll look into that. Yeah. So, anyways, we'll be back next week. So next week we will be joined by Jimmy Alvarez to talk about ACM 2.5. Lots of really cool stuff there. I have a side project where I'm working on doing a whole lab environment for Red Hatters and RHPDS that involves a lot of ACM stuff. So I've learned a heck of a lot more about ACM than I used to, and it's really cool. So if you haven't had a chance to look at ACM yet, definitely encourage you to do that. Let's see, I'm trying to think. The 29th, we've got a topic, but I don't remember what it is now.
It was I don't know the name, like the cute name for it, right? But it's essentially we're taking OpenShift admins from the field, right? We're going to bring one of them on, and we're going to talk to him about his experience and stuff like that. So
Awesome. Oh yeah, that's we're bringing on one of the accelerators, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So for anybody who's not familiar with the Red Hat Accelerators program, so they're like they're customer partner folks who are advocates for Red Hat. So we reached out to the accelerators team, and we asked, hey, does anybody want to come on and share your experiences? So not like Commons, but a little bit like Commons. So that'll be happening on the 29th. So yeah, just for anybody who is interested in any of the topics we got coming up, please subscribe to whatever channel you happen to be on, so that way you'll get those alerts when we go on the air. I would also say you can go to red.ht/livestream, and on that page is the calendar. So we try and keep that calendar updated with what's going on, not just here on Ask an OpenShift Admin, but across all of the different live streams. So you can subscribe to that. It's a Google Calendar, and then you can see all the stuff we got going on. And I'll say that for me personally, because there's always a lot of stuff going on, I subscribe to that, but then I copy over specific events that I care about to my personal calendar, so that way I don't get all that noise. So just another option to keep track of or help limit. And we were talking about the other week with Hillary, right? Alert fatigue.
Yeah.
Calendar fatigue. All right, I'll quit my rambling. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Johnny, for joining. Thank you, Stephanie, for all your help in the background. You've been busy today, keeping up with links and all that other stuff. So thank you so much. To our audience, as always, we really appreciate you joining us today. Chat has been phenomenal. We love all the questions. Again, anything we missed,
totally.
anything that comes up, don't hesitate to reach out to us. All of that being said, Johnny, last words.
I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you had some good PTO. Stephanie, you're awesome as always. Yeah, if you guys can go to YouTube and like and subscribe, it just shows that we're doing the right stuff. And yeah, looking forward to next week. So I'll see you later.